How's it going, ladies and Bruces? I'm Bobby Sixkilla and welcome back to Sekimeiya. Now, in the last episode, shit really got real. We locked ourselves up in this room with the intention of staying here until the time was up. Then all of a sudden, Katai comes storming in, accusing us of this, that, and the other because he's a moron, while Arcado and Sai escape. Now, Arcado's come back in, bashed his way through the door, and doesn't know who the fuck we are anymore. I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens. What's your game? You gonna act like you don't recognize me? Arcado responded by looking at the rest of us, expecting to be backed up. However, his confusion only grew and he realized we found his words to be the strange ones. Excuse me? Why are you looking at me like that? Where the fuck did this man appear from? You will not trick me twice. Where's Sai? Sai? I have no idea. You left the room earlier and didn't come back. What are you all even doing here? As I saw how lost he looked, I began to take his words seriously. He sounded genuine, but not a thing he was saying made sense. What do you mean? You really not remember Katai? Katai? Is that his name? Where should I remember him from? He's been with us the whole time. He took a few seconds to answer, during which he eyed me like I'd gone insane. Why are you all lying? What's happening? Huh? What do you mean? Out of nowhere, he looked at Shiroya. Like the rest of us, she was taken aback, as the two of them had barely exchanged words since we'd gotten trapped. I mean what I said. Why are you all here? We tried to stay put in one place together. Do you not remember that? No, I do not. That doesn't answer my question, though. How does it not answer your question? You and Sai escaped, and now you've come back. What? That's not true. I didn't escape. I couldn't quite grasp it, but something felt off about Arcado's behaviour. Past his bizarre claims, he seemed more aggressive, and his voice sounded more composed. Not only that, but he'd been fixing his gaze on Shiroya. Arcado, why'd you come back? Do you intend to stay here again? The door was locked. So, were you all waiting here? I'm very confused. What you are is a lying piece of shit. Do you think you can simply come back, acting as if nothing happened? I don't know who you are, but don't yell at me. I'm not opposed to staying here, but you'll all need to explain yourselves. Edna moved forward and took the key out of the door. She brought Arcado inside, closed the door and locked it. Then she set the chain again. Even if the chain can be ignored from the outside, we'll easily hear it if someone tries to force it open again. I was probably wrong before. We should keep the key inside to avoid all this. I'll keep it with me. This way if Sai comes, we won't be able to enter or let anyone else leave. What about Isla? Aren't you gonna get her? None of us could believe what we were hearing. Had he forgotten what had happened? Or was he talking about a dead body? I don't know what you're trying, but it's futile. You're revealing your true colours by trying to play dumb. I don't understand anything. I saw the elevator had been fixed. But how did you all get here? Again, such an ambiguous question couldn't be answered by any of us since we didn't comprehend its meaning. The elevator, that was fixed a long time ago. And where do you mean? Here, the Ashiya floor. With the key Nami had. Do you actually not remember that? Are you fucking with me? She's not. What's wrong with that? Well, I don't get it. Where was the key exactly? In one of her pockets. But there's no way. Do you not remember that Naomi died? What? No, I mean, when was her body found? Many hours ago. Arcado closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was as confused as us. Are you lying to me? That's funny of you to say. Was it you who told me that Artsky had been threatening everyone? Excuse me, I never said that. My head was going numb. I had no way to interpret what I was hearing. This is ridiculous. Did you all go insane? If you're being sincere, it's clear that your memories contradict ours. What time do you think it is? I have no idea, but I don't think it's 4 o'clock yet. Right, that matches the current time. What do you remember, beginning at the start of our imprisonment? Artsky, please don't tell me you're playing along. He's trying to manipulate us, and this time it's a lot more obvious. Shut up. As I said, we stayed put, but eventually you all left. Then when I went to find you, I heard knocks coming from here. That's not how it happened. You and Sai were the ones who left. Do you not remember anything from the time before you started to wait? I understood why Katai didn't want me to humour Arcado, but not too long ago I considered the possibility that Sekimeiya could cause memory loss. I wanted to know if that was possible, as it could have let Isla's story occur as we'd imagined it. If after escaping Arcado had travelled through time, that might have been the direct cause of the state he was in. I'm having trouble understanding what you're referring to. Before we started to wait, we investigated the building and Naomi appeared briefly just to disappear again. That's not true. You were surprised that Naomi's body was found, but not that she died. Subconsciously you must have known that, but you didn't remember having found her, is that so? Are you sure that nothing happened right before we began to wait? I don't know what you're talking about. We found a hidden passage in the storeroom, and a door that could lead outside. You can't be serious, a hidden exit? Why are we still here then? We had nowhere to open it. Do you not recall any of that? I don't, because it didn't happen. There are no gaps in my memory, so don't treat me as if I'm delusional. Say, Shiroya, is this some sort of trap? No. I understand. That's fair, I suppose. I'm sorry to sound so blunt, but there's a reason. Is there a reason why you keep talking to her specifically? Huh? I don't know how to answer this. I sympathize with you too, as I've already said. That's why it's surprising to see you lying like this. You're really saying that this guy has been with us the whole time? I suppose I deserve this treatment, don't I? Why don't you be straight with me then? Akane, what the fuck are you talking about? You sympathize with us? Just drop it. What the hell does that mean? Everything about you has been suspicious from the start. I get it. What do you get? Is your plan to drive us insane? Because you're doing a great job. Yeah, this conversation is really going off the rails and I can't handle it. Why won't you answer? Why'd you say you sympathize with us? Maybe you're the ones who lost your memories and forgot about the time when you told me. Are you out of your mind? Why the hell did we tell you anything about us? No, I get it. The Sekimeiya must have inserted false memories in your head, right? Is that what you're gonna say next? The Sekimeiya? Oh, you forgot about that too. That's funny. Forget about it, of course not. Why would it give me false memories though? I wasn't being serious. I was beginning to lose it. Until then, I've been trying to tackle every mystery calmly, no matter how crazy it had been. This time though, knowing that Curator could have been lying to us, I couldn't do the same. Was he messing with us? And had hinted at knowing more about us deliberately? I couldn't tell if he'd been referring to that. I could tell you weren't serious, but why'd you mention the Sekimeiya? Do I have to give you the rundown? We found out the Sekimeiya could make us travel to the past, so we locked ourselves up to escape from the culprit who's been using it. Curator didn't answer, but he remained pensive. Since he hadn't objected to the existence of a time travel stone, he must have known about it in some capacity, even if some of his memories had disappeared. Is there anything wrong with what I said? Of course. You don't seem too phased after hearing that the Sekimeiya made us travel through time. However, earlier you didn't mention it when you explained your version of the events. So how do you know about it? I'm not sure. You're pathetic, Curator. What's your goal with these theatrics? Shut the fuck up. In the case he's telling the truth, some of his memories must have remained hidden within his mind, as Naomi's death and the Sekimeiya's powers hadn't been received as a surprise. Do you really not remember Katai at all? He works in this building, managing the security system. He told us all about all of that a while ago. None of that happened. I laughed in frustration. Since we got entrapped, not a single thing had made sense. And when we thought that we'd begun to have the slightest grasp on some events, Curator had appeared, letting us know that we might have been wrong about everything. If touching the Sekimeiya had caused it, we might have ignored an extra effect of the travels from the beginning. Isla? Isla? All of a sudden, Edna snapped. Her whole face shifted into the most desperate expression a human could make, and she dashed towards the door, slamming into it. Ignoring that she'd had the right key and the chain was set, she tried to pull it open frantically until her motions abruptly stopped. What are you doing? I stood up from the bed, reacting to her sudden change. With Shiroya's help, I grabbed her shoulders before she stopped moving, thinking that she might have suffered from a panic or anxiety attack. Before we could say anything else, she crumpled down and started crying. Isla, she's there, I heard her! Her voice distorted by sobs, she let out those words. The four of us exchanged looks unsettled by that claim. Even though Curator seemed to have forgotten about Isla's death, he looked confused as well, since none of us had heard anything. She was suffering, I could hear her yell. She's outside. She's here outside this door. There, you all hear her too, right? Whenever Edna stopped speaking, pure silence filled the room. After she asked us that, we paid attention, but no sound entered our ears. Yes, it's her! Edna, there's nobody outside. I don't hear anything, you should lie down. What? There's no way! Even though she said that, her body gave out even further as she understood that what she was saying couldn't be true. She tried to steady herself by supporting her body on the door. I hoped to stand back up and brought her close to the bed. She was forcefully shutting her eyes as a measure to resist the pain. What had happened to Isla might have suddenly rushed back to her, as she would probably remember the trauma for years to come. She must have hallucinated the sound, given how no one else had heard it. Hey, you don't mean to say that Isla... I nodded, making eye contact with him, even though we knew nothing about Curator. If he was acting disconcerted, he must have maintained a facade from the start, and had been taken advantage of the low amount of suspicion we'd openly thrown at him. It can't be, she was with us the entire time. Curator sat on the other bed and placed his hands on his forehead, staring at his lap. He'd stopped questioning us since we had mentioned the Sekimeiya, as he must have realised that we hadn't been lying. Instead, he seemed to be trying to comprehend what has happened to him and why his memories didn't match ours. Do you remember touching the Sekimeiya after leaving with Sai? Even vaguely. Touching the Sekimeiya with your skin makes you travel to the past, you know that, right? No, stop. I haven't seen Sai in a while. Since he left the room, and I haven't touched the Sekimeiya like that either. That's not true. You admitted to having touched it a while after we found the second Naomi. The second? I have no idea what you're saying. Please shut up. I was seriously straining him, so I refrained from continuing. He knew what time it was and didn't remember having touched the Sekimeiya even once. If he was being honest, it indicated that he hadn't travelled far through time. If he had, his internal clock would have differed from ours. And if he'd looked at the time, he would have known it was earlier than it should have been, as he didn't remember the exact moment of his travel. So, if his memory issues had been caused by the Sekimeiya, it was unlikely if it had been due to the travelling further than I had yet. I'm sorry, but can you leave me alone? I don't feel well, and it's hard to breathe with so many people around. He might not have been aware of how unreasonable his demand was, since he hadn't yet accepted what Edina was going through. His face was identical to the one we'd been making when we found him in the bathroom. Maybe he even had a tendency to seek solitude when overwhelmed. Edina gave an immediate, wordless response in the form of standing up and moving to the ladder, obviously intent on going up. Alright, let us know if anything comes to you. Shidoya and I followed Akuto's request too, and Katai, while he maintained an offended expression full of doubt, joined us last. He closed the hatch so that anything he said couldn't reach Akuto's ears. Atsuki, I thought you were a bit smarter than this. Would he really let him trick you so blatantly? The irony of this question was almost nauseating, but I fought back the urge to object to it. I fought back the urge to vomit on his shoes. I was in no mood for pointless discussions. He sighed and sat on the same bed as Edina, in front of Shidoya and myself. He tried a few positions until he decided to lean back against the wall. And we need to leave him the entire lower partition, so that he doesn't cry. Meanwhile, only God knows what Sai is doing. Once again, nobody acknowledged Katai's presumptuous and poorly timed jabs. He rolled his eyes, accepting that nobody would humour him. His behaviour had clearly changed gradually as time had gone on. While he had attempted to look composed and firm from the start, he was no longer actively suppressing his anger and frustration. I tried to clear my head a bit. Nothing about Akuto or Edina's recent actions made sense, but I knew I'd be lost if I tried to tackle those questions. Instead, I went one step back as I realised that I'd missed an important detail during all the fuss. Akuto was able to enter the room on his own, and when he did, he saw that the key was placed in the outer keyhole of the door. Since later Akuto told us that he'd only been drawn to the bedroom after hearing Katai's knocks, it's very unlikely that he had the key on himself. Instead, it must have already been placed in the keyhole, and he used it to open the door. This is a solid indicator of how Akuto and Sai managed to escape. The door was open from the outside using the key we'd hidden. Of course, it's always possible they left it there to make us think that, but that seems a bit pointless because they didn't hesitate to leave us behind, openly telling us that we should suspect them. Once they made it out, they must have left the key in the keyhole since they didn't need it anymore. Outside help was used to escape, and they accepted it by unsetting the chain. This supports what I thought of earlier regarding the loop set of actions that they could have fabricated on the spot. They thought of the loop, lured Katai here, saw that the door had been opened, exited through it, travelled back in time, unlocked the door from the outside and left the key in the outer keyhole. If the universe accepted this, it was a completely viable way out. In fact, that doesn't make sense, but okay. In fact, since the door must have been opened from the outside, not much else works. It's very unlikely anyone else could have fulfilled that role. If after a while, one of us exits the room with the key that Edina has and goes to the past to unlock the door, we'd still be creating a casual loop. A causal loop. That's the only reason Edina has the key was because someone unlocked the way out for Akuto and Sai. So, if someone will go back to the past and unlock the door, for it to be a cohesive travel, that person will have to be unrelated to our imprisonment, and going back to the past will not have to be a result of our actions after we lock ourselves up, since they're all branching from that fact that Akuto and Sai have left. With how likely it is that Akuto and Sai dealt with the Sekimeiya after escaping, the person who will, or has, travelled through time has to use the Sekimeiya we hid in Naomi's locker, as its location hasn't been influenced by the escape. Lastly, there's a much easier solution, that there was always someone else in the building that we missed. Just now Edina acted like she heard Isla outside the bedroom, even though nobody else heard anything. If it truly happened, she could have opened the door for Akuto and Sai if her existence there wasn't in any capacity derived from their escape. I tried to calm Edina down by saying that nobody was outside, and I thought that it was impossible. However, it shouldn't be. It follows that Shiroya's theory from earlier. In fact, if Isla went weeks back in time, dying in the cabinet must be the final step of her travels. However, she said that her friend would wait for her outside the tower, meaning that right now it's possible an alive version of Isla still exists somewhere. And we found a door that might lead outside. We can't open it from here, since we have no handle to turn, but the story might be different from the outside. Thinking about it, it's technically possible for anyone to have entered the tower after the last time who did a thorough search, so they could have opened the bedroom door. Of course, it would have required knowledge of what was going on inside. I was still fixated on the thought that Arcado and Sai could have retroactively opened the door by the mere fact of having thought of a causal loop, well aligned with the circumstances. If it was possible, it was a very powerful concept to put to practice, and the only requirement was to properly think of what you have to do. I knew I could be seen as suspicious, but I decided to attempt it. Edna, can you lend me a key for a second? Why? What are you doing? A slight frown also appeared on Shiroya's face in response to my request. I honestly just want to understand how Arcado and Sai left. I won't use it. Then why do you want it? Because I need it to see if what I'm thinking of could work. Technically, I lied. If it worked, I would end up using the key. Is it important? I think so. Okay, as long as you don't run off with it or anything. I'll be back in a second. She gave me the key with her trust. My idea might have been rushed, but that shouldn't have been an issue. Essentially, I wanted to replicate what I thought Arcado and Sai might have done to escape. They hadn't needed to have the key inside, since it had been outside the room from the beginning, and they could have used it after travelling. However, if I just managed to leave the room after travelling, I couldn't open the door, as the key would be inside with Ed in it. That wouldn't allow for the loop to work, so I wouldn't be able to exit in the first place. Hence, my idea had to be shifted a little. I would go down and attempt to open the door. If it was open, it would mean that the loop could be completed. I'd leave, and on the crystal floor, I'd unlock Naomi's locker and activate the Sekimeiya. It was likely that I would go back far enough, given how long the Sekimeiya would have been there for. Then, when the time arrived, I would unlock the door from the outside with the key Eden had handed me, allowing the loop to be created. Finally, once my original self had left the room, I'd enter it immediately after having experienced the whole loop. For them, it would seem as if I hadn't gone anywhere. I opened the hatch and went down, a little nervous to see if it would actually work. Arcado raised his head, but he didn't say anything until I began to walk toward the door. Are you leaving? No idea. If it worked, the door would be very slightly open, enough to allow me to drag it inward. Since Arcado had been sitting on the bed the whole time, in the future, I'd have to open it very slowly to make so that I didn't make a noise you could notice. I unset the chain, put 2 fingers in the hole of the door, and dragged it toward me. You need to use the key. It didn't budge. Could such a thing really not occur? I mean, it shouldn't, right? It doesn't make any fucking sense. I sighed, slightly disappointed, and set the chain again. Figuring the trick out would have felt like good progress towards understanding the Sekimeiya, so it was unfortunate that I couldn't know the reason why it hadn't functioned. Ignore me. Do you remember anything else? No, and I won't ever, since I have nothing to remember. If you say so. I accepted his claim and went back up. Did you figure anything out? I doubt it. I gave the key back to Edina and sat where I'd been before. I heaved a sigh, ignoring the odd looks I received, and wondered if I could work with them, with the rest of my little test. This is really frustrating. There's no way to know why it didn't work. Well, it's very possible that the existence of this kind of loop is impossible, or perhaps willingly creating one is. I can't draw a single conclusion. There are too many factors that could have stopped the loop from reaching its end, effectively denying its existence. For example, what if Arcado's lying to us? He became cautious of my presence as soon as I approached the door. So if I'd gotten it to open, he might have restrained me. If that's what he's after, is preventing us from leaving and allowing Sai to roam freely, that could have been why he prompted the 4 of us to go up top. If he'd done that, I couldn't have proceeded, so the door would never have been opened. Similarly, what if Sai had taken the Sekimeiya out of Naomi's locker? Downstairs, I could have used it to go back into the past, yet again placing a barrier on the loop. Depending on what determines the amount of time travelled, it's possible that activating the Sekimeiya would have sent me far enough to open the door, and that this problem would have repeated in the future if I tried it again. There are many unknown reasons that could have made this loop an impossibility. I recognised another potential reason that could have interfered with my plan, and it had been a pretty big oversight, as it has to do with the biggest difference between what I attempted and what I thought Arcado and Sai might have done. Right, when Shiroya and I travelled from the cleaning room, even though the cart disappeared, it didn't appear in the attic with us, as the bodies we appeared in were most likely identical to how they'd been at 1210, and both of us had been in the attic in the same locations. This means that if I travelled holding the bedroom key, chances are I wouldn't have appeared with it in the past. Arcado and Sai wouldn't have encountered that problem since, for them, the key would have always been under the bathroom's carpet. But no, that shouldn't have been a problem. I could have used one of the handles we left under the beds. There might have been another screwdriver in the opposite bedroom, and even if there wasn't, putting the screws in without a screwdriver is very easy. Could it be that wasn't possible because it wasn't part of the loop I'd thought of? Or maybe I just wouldn't have been able to do it without alerting Arcado. Or what if I wouldn't have been able to travel? When we left Sekimeiya and Naomi's locker, it wasn't working. Perhaps it never started to function again, for some reason. Finally, I thought about the most interesting reason why the loop might not have worked for me, and I was reminded of how messy time travel could become in the blink of an eye. We've already been here for more than 40 minutes, and we think that in some way the location we travel to is determined by where we were in the recent past. So for example, it's possible that I would have gone 30 minutes to the past and appeared where I'd been 15 minutes prior. Since I'd been here in both of those time coordinates, I would have appeared in this bedroom. Even if I appeared with the key on myself, that would have caused a situation that I'd never experienced. Going to the past would have immediately changed things, overriding the way in which I'd gone to the past in the first place. Since, if this had happened, the loop would have become impossible, that could have also resulted in my failed attempt. And Arcado and Sai had spent less time in the bedroom and most likely used a different Sekimeiya, might not have faced this issue either. For a few minutes my mind lapsed into silence. I managed to ignore how tired I was, but the feeling was starting to kick back in. The four of us kept shifting around, mindlessly looking at the ceiling or at the walls. We were all powerless, and our lack of mutual trust wore us down from constantly being on guard. I didn't discard my recent thoughts. Arcado and Sai had found a way to escape that involved outside help. Furthermore, if the Arcado below us wasn't acting, he must have undergone what had caused his memories to differ from ours. The more I thought about it, the more I realised how powerful it could be if you could create loops that ensured your success from the beginning. The culprit we'd chased behind could have taken advantage of it, making sure that their movements would always work. It's bizarre, but if you understood how the Sekimeiya works thoroughly, you could abuse the concept to a very high extent. You went across a hallway full of doors and deadly traps, that you can think of many ways to do it and you're not sure which one will work. With the Sekimeiya, you could be the creator of causal loops, assuring success in these situations would be a way to use them. If you can think, I'll try doors 1, 3 and 5, and I'll walk touching the right wall. After I make it across, I'll go around from the outside and leave a mark behind the door to this place. If you look where you'll leave a mark and find it, you know the arrangement of doors and movements will work. If the mark isn't there, you know you'd die midway, rendering you unable to leave the mark. You can keep thinking of different arrangements until the mark appears. Since you only move back and move forth once you see the mark, it's an effective bootstrap, since the end result is what always allows it to happen. But despite being a paradox, there's actually an origin to it. Even though this is an extreme situation, it can apply to any circumstance because it removes the generalized risk associated with going back to the past. Regardless of the circumstance, you can think something up in your head, and if it'll work, you'll see the successful result, and if it won't, nothing will happen. You'll be guaranteed to never fail no matter what you attempt. The killer could have used this method before killing Naomi. If I move this specific way after killing her and I'm not seen, I'll let my current self know by leaving a drawer in the next room open, for example. Another big advantage is that you'd be able to make any move that's currently hard to accomplish by deciding to occur retroactively. At some point the killer might have not wanted us to enter a room, however, they couldn't go and lock it, or they would have been seen. The solution would be to decide in the future I'll go to the past and lock it, so that it's already locked now. This doesn't have to be a bootstrap paradox, so it's fundamentally very similar to what I'm thinking. Depending on how it works, the possibilities could be limitless. There's an even higher step to reach. It's considerably different, but it follows along with a few things I thought about earlier regarding the date displayed on Sai's watch. Out of the countless examples, could you go back in time, trade information with someone, write it all down, and leave it on a note that you'd see before travelling through time? Like the 7 Enigma, for example. You'd read the note and go back to the past, however, since you would already know the contents of it, you'd have no reason to exchange the information. What you'd have to do is leave behind the note you'd read, so that you could read it before travelling. The note itself would be a paradox that you caused, but was the past truly changed? Was the past in which you exchanged information truly overwritten? Or did it never exist in the first place? If Sai's watch got to 999-1231 by spending infinite time in a loop, did the past in which the time counted up to that date really exist in any capacity? The final step is one I'm not willing to accept. Could you witness a very smoothly committed crime, decide that you were the perpetrator, and go back into the past and replicate it? The loops until now have always had some kind of origin to them, but this one doesn't. It defies causality very firmly. However, What would be possible would be to go back in time, prevent the real perpetrator from committing the crime, and then replicate it, being certain of your success. That's just a way to use a time travel device. The Sekimeiya must operate on one of these levels, the lowest being the thought-up loops aren't possible. If this is the case, Arcado and Sai must have received outside help from a third party. That sounds more reasonable. Perhaps it was the other East loop. That sounds more reasonable, to be fair. These thought-up loops sound ridiculous. Level 1, using a loop they created mentally would have allowed them to escape on their own in the way that I've been thinking about. Level 2 would complicate things, and it's more of an interesting concept than anything. The recorder and Eastless person made me think that there are some possible benefits of staying here for a much longer time, even though at first it seemed incredibly negative. If I found a very important reason to stay and a method to accomplish it, probably through the security room's computer, could I grab the recorder, go back into the past with it and place it in Eastless purse for the sole purpose of reproducing everything exactly to get to the point in which I decided to turn it into a reality? That would be level 2. But now I'll ignore it. Would I send the recorder back in time to reproduce everything instead of writing a note that details it all thoroughly because I didn't live that? That's ridiculous. Even though level 1 appears to have endless applications, there should be a daunting barrier to cross. The memories of a person who thinks of the loop. The person would always have to work around the past that they remember. Let's say the culprit wanted to kill someone in the event room, and they had to choose between hallways A and B to escape. The loops will always entail going back to the past. If the culprit had seen hallway A empty after the point Naomi would have been killed, later, when they thought that they had to create a loop, they'd know they couldn't use hallway A. If instead they'd seen hallways A and B empty, they would have put themselves in a corner and would have been unable to create a loop in which they escaped successfully. It sounds a bit crazy. It doesn't matter if they saw these hallways empty. If they hadn't looked at them, they would still have been empty. That's not the case though. That logic clashes with the most important part of the concept, that the origin of the loop is the mind of the person who will execute it. Both hallways were empty. Why hadn't the culprit seen their future self escaping through one of them? The reason is that seeing their escape route would have told them about the plan that they'd later think of, and the origin would have disappeared. So, one would never see a result of a future loop before having thought of it, as that could induce or highly influence its creation, resulting in the classic bootstrap. They thought of the loop because they'd experienced it. If the culprit is operating under this knowledge, that'd be a very good reason to stay hidden. If instead they'd spend time in front of all the security screens observing what occurred in real time across the building, whenever they need to make a retroactive move, their own memories of all the empty places would have been the only barrier preventing them from accomplishing it. Of course, this is also because the past can't be changed, so in short, if they've observed too much, they would make any future loop impossible, as they would never see a loop in action before thinking of it. What it basically boils down to is that in some instances, having a lack of knowledge could actually be far more beneficial than knowing everything. It was a very intriguing concept, but nothing assured me that it was applicable. I was still a bit upset that I had no indication of why my plan hadn't worked. Would it work if I could slide the key under the door and wait a few minutes before trying to leave? That would have matched Arcado and Sai's circumstances more closely, but it could have led to even more reasons behind the future failure. For example, Sai could have taken the key from under the door if he'd been nearby. I wasn't sure what to think or do. There might have been indications of how loops are handled already. Technically, the first time I travelled to the past, I might have created a bootstrap unconsciously. From room B4, I travelled 20 minutes to the past. I didn't know what had happened, so I ended up taking the elevator to the 6th floor. That action made our original selves follow the elevator up, and eventually, it all led to me travelling through time. If I hadn't gone up with the elevator, things might have played out considerably differently. We would have remained on floor 4, and everyone else's thoughts would have varied. In short, if I hadn't gone up, it's possible I wouldn't have ended up travelling to the past. Hence, travelling to the past is, in a way, what led me to travelling to the past. I'm not sure it was a bootstrap, but what's certain is that I didn't intend for it to occur. By travelling, I merely finished up the past that had already taken place. I ceased my thoughts. I was getting dizzy. The minutes had kept passing, and as expected, nothing had occurred. We were faced with a dilemma regarding Sai. We knew he might probably still be down there, but we didn't know whether following him was what he wanted. He might have intended to disrupt the peace as much as he wanted. He might have wanted to experiment with the Sekimeiya or to follow along with his bigger plan. Ultimately, we'd once again decided to continue staying locked up because of Edina's input. I still think that's the best plan too, frankly. My thoughts had trailed off and were revived by Shiroya's yawn. The silence had become unsettling, as it had gone on for more than 30 minutes since we left Arcado below. Are you guys really fine with this? Katai took my renewed awareness as a chance to question our actions again. We're letting Sai run free and ignoring Arkado's obvious lies. Don't you understand they set this up? Arkado's just making sure we don't head down. Why else would he have come back? Don't you think that if that's what he wanted, he would have chosen to tell us wouldn't have chosen to tell us such a ridiculous story? Of course I don't. Before they left, they'd make up the whole scenario where you were the mastermind. I'm betting they thought of this, Arkado's lost his memories story, precisely to make us think it's too ridiculous to be a lie. Well, if you want to leave, you're alone on that. We've already decided what we'll do. He glared at me with an incensed look and attempted to calm himself. He didn't insist further before closing his eyes again. I thought he'd give it up, but not long after he opened his mouth again. Fine, stay here if you want, but unlike you, I won't let anyone laugh in my face like Arkado is doing right now. With 3 silent pairs of eyes looking at him, he approached the hatch and opened it. He roughly climbed down the ladder, not letting go of his indignation for a second. He's an idiot. We returned our gazes to where they'd once been, intended to continue letting time pass quietly. What the... What a joke. Atsuki, come here. Let me guess, he's gone. Katai's voice boomed through the open hatch. Shiroi and Edina looked at me in search of my reaction. I simply sighed and stood up. I mimicked Katai's actions and climbed down. Upon stepping off the ladder, it didn't even take me half a second to comprehend Katai's shout. Wow, this is just great. Stop messing around. Perhaps the two of them weren't so far off the mark earlier. With intrigued looks, Shiroi and Edina peeked through the hatch. From it they could see the empty room around Katai and me. Is he gone again? Well, he's not here, so yes. I rubbed my eyes at Katai's obnoxious voice. Meanwhile, I got closer to the door as he confirmed that Arkado wasn't anywhere. The chain's still set, that's strange. Strange, no Atsuki, you really screwed up this time. Who cares if he's gone? He didn't have to come back last time, fuck him. From Shiroi's face, I could tell that she and I knew word by word the accusation Katai was about to make. What's strange is what you did earlier. You took the key from Edina, came here and unlocked the door for Arkado, and then you set the chain. Why the hell would I do that? To let him escape, idiot. Wasn't he the one who decided to come here in the first place? Yes, it appears both of you aren't quite on the bright side. If I'm wrong, go ahead and illuminate us. Why did you want the key? To see if I could retroactively open the door. You think you're smart, don't you? You've gone too far. It seems Atsuki, Arkado, and Sai were working together the whole time. Shiroi, are you part of that group too? Oh my god, he's painful. He's a painful person to listen to. Can we kick him out of the room and just the 3 of us hanging out here? You're banished. You're kicked out of the tribe. Fuck off. Go back out there. Instead of answering, she came down, followed by Edina. She looked around, but Arkado wasn't anywhere. He disappeared without leaving a trace, as if he'd been an illusion from the start. At the same time, I couldn't blame Katai for that much suspecting me, since I understood how questionable my action must have looked. Anyway, it's more than enough. We're leaving. Atsuki, this time, that camera clearly recorded your actions. When you let Arkado escape, don't think this will go unpunished. Oh shit, how could I forget about that? I had to stop taking him seriously, as that would eventually drive me insane. He pushed me aside, unset the chain and tried to open the door, but only met with failure. Alright Edina, we've tried your suggestion, but it's not going to work if half of us have different intentions. We need to go find Arkado and Sai. We can't even trust these 2 kids. I didn't feel like giving my input, so I remained quiet. So did Edina, who looked down uncertainly. Enough already. Remembering the pocket in which she'd hidden the key, Katai suddenly reached inside and retrieved it at the cost of startling her. Without reacting further, she stayed immobile, watching him insert the key into the door. That's assault, sir. Jesus Christ, you can't put your fucking hands in other people's pockets. With abrupt and stiff motions, he turned it and dragged the door open. Without looking back, he walked away. He opted not to lock us inside and kept the door as it was. None of us said anything or looked at each other. Instead, against my own expectations, Edina walked forward and exited the room too. Why? Then Shiroi and I exchanged looks. She gave me a bitter smile that I replied to with a long sigh. I estimated it must have been around 4:20. Nice. Meaning that less than 5 hours remained until our scheduled freedom. We stayed still for a few seconds, contemplating the open door in front of us that symbolized our utter failure to keep everyone in one place. Yes. I'm guessing you want to try and see if Arkado and Sai could have escaped alone? Yes, it didn't work though. I figured. Maybe we really missed a hidden person then. Maybe. I shrugged lightly. I didn't know how else to approach their disappearance. Well, do you want to stay here? I'm not sure. First we should fix that. She pointed at the handleless door. The handle should have been under the bed of the other bedroom. Right, we shouldn't keep them detached. After more than an hour, I stepped out of the room and viewed the scenery of the attic again. Then I entered the other bedroom and kneeled to see both handles were still there. With the same screwdriver as before, I put them in place. I turned both to test that they worked properly, and I removed the key that Katai had left in the inner keyhole. Finally, I put it back in the drawers that we found it in, along with the screwdriver. Remember this? From my pocket, I took out the key to Nozomi's locker. Oh, you still had it? Yeah, I used the cabinet key to hide it, which Arcado and Sai must have left with later. I think so. If they need to use the Sekimeiya, that might have been Arcado that was why Arcado was in such an odd state. Most likely, if he wasn't lying, we could have been lucky the times that we travelled since nothing happened to us. Maybe Arcado and Isla suffered from a side effect. Like before, Shiroya went quiet at the mention of Isla. It had already been quite a while since we learned about her fate. But, by the way, is it me or is the smell from earlier back? Oh man, dead Naomi again? No more dead Naomis, please. Oh yes, now that you mention it, it's very similar to the one all around the crystal floor. I can't tell where it's coming from, and it's not easy to perceive. I moved around to see if getting closer to the source would be noticeable, but I felt no change. I spent a while going over the way Arcado and Sai could have escaped, but I focused on the fact that the key had been left in the outer keyhole. However, even though Arcado escaped again, the chain was left intact. I know. I think we should go down and see what happened to the Sekimeiya. We should come across the person who opened the door for Arcado and Sai too. Alright. We hadn't inspected Arcado after he'd come back, so it was possible he had the key on him. Despite that, he couldn't have left the chain set when he exited. We took timid steps out of the bedroom, as if an invisible net was still pulling us in. Once we were in the hallway, the first thing I did was enter the kitchen. Alright, we're gonna wrap this one up here. Fuck leaving, man. I would've just gone back to bed. Screw this shit. Let these twats sort it out among themselves. Who gives a fuck if someone takes the Sekimeiya? It's not our problem. We don't own it. Anyway, I guess we're gonna go start wandering around the place again. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Thanks again out for me, and I'll see you in the next one.